Hey all. So remember Ad Astra? It's this weird movie that they were really building up as being like the best, most amazing experience that you're ever going to have, and it's all about space and everything. Well, it was apparently written and directed by James Gray, as well as co-written by Ethan Gross. Now, I don't know too much about these particular gentlemen, but I can tell you this much. The story itself is disturbingly boring. I mean, they tried to build it up like it was this big adventure, and given the film has wonderful spectacle, it cost over $80 million to make. Now, given you had some talent like Tommy Lee Jones, Brad Pitt, Donald Sutherland, among several other talented people, you had a relatively small actual cast when it came to the number of people you saw. Oh, and of course Liv Tyler. I forgot her because she has a very small role. You see her, I think, a total of 3 times. So, here's the thing. It's a drama, and dramas are always problematic whenever you get into any kind of sci-fi. When I watched films like Disney's Mission to Mars, that one had some comedy in it. They had some little bits that they had worked out that were little side scenes, little vignettes that give you a sense of who the characters are, what they're like. But this one, they go for... it's produced by 20th Century Fox, and they absolutely went for... everything that possibly can go wrong will go wrong, and at the worst possible time. The Murphy's Law way of writing. And it is just atrocious. The character of Major Roy McBride, Brad Pitt's character, is essentially a Mary Sue, but it goes beyond that. Because he's not just good at everything he does and doesn't really face a challenge, and, you can omit the one factor where a Mary Sue will usually have a relationship or sexual encounter with another character. In this case, this film is entirely about men. Female characters have virtually no distinction in terms of who they are, how they think, anything. We get no payoff with one female character that we should be really relating to, we should be bonding with a bit more as a character, and instead everyone is cold. And it feels like it was written and directed by people, possibly Mr. Gray, who just have a hard time relating to other human beings. And I don't mean like on the autism spectrum kind of way, I mean in a neurotypical kind of way, where they just don't understand people. This whole show is basically about, like, what if space development kept going further and further and further? Like, what if it was basically where we thought we would be in the mid-90s if we hadn't had Reagan and Bush cutting back on space exploration? So they have, like... a kind of orbital tether almost, which is a theoretical structure that you would build up from the ground or down from orbit, and it would be getting so much centripetal force, or centrifugal force, rather, that it would be able to stand on its own, basically. You wouldn't need to worry about the weight going into the Earth because enough of the mass would be sort of equalizing with the pull outward from the centrifugal force. But you've got moon bases and moon pirates. And, oh my god, the moon pirates. I mean, they're supposed to be in like this sort of bare bones version of a lunar rover, but it's like, how the hell did they even get there? it costs a lot of money just in this world to get from the Earth to the moon. And yeah, you've got like, you remember the episode of Futurama with the lunar park, where there's the amusement park on the moon? Well, so help me, that's basically what Brad Pitt's character looks at this as. He's like, it's gone all commercial now, and now it's all, tourists. And he looks over and sees a kid taking a picture with a mock alien and all that stuff. It's really, like, does this person who wrote this just hate people? I mean, were they going around Hollywood and kind of looking at all the tourists and going, oh, I hate these tourists, I'm going to write about this in my movie? And yeah, it's just cynical at that point. It's kind of mean-spirited, And it just keeps going for well over 2 hours. And it's to give you this sense of travel, like, okay, he's going from the Earth to the moon, and then he's going from the moon to Mars, and oh, it looks like this thing is happening. There's an entire scene on the way to Mars where I think it's a Norwegian vessel is adrift in space, basically. And they go aboard, even though even though Roy doesn't feel like that's a good idea. He's like, they've got a mayday, we're not getting any responses, we don't know what the heck is going on, and our mission comes first. If something's the matter there, a supply ship can get it. He's kind of calloused, and you get that sense, but the other people are sort of representative of the old school of thought. The way they talk is obviously meant to be very reminiscent of the astronauts that you had back in the 60s. A lot of this is meant to call back to the spirit of space exploration from the 60s and 70s, where everyone talks a bit like this, and they all kind of emphasize their R's just a little bit heavily. Anyway, it's a bizarre facet to the movie, but he goes aboard this vessel, and you get this echoed later, where aboard the Norwegian vessel, there doesn't seem to be anyone, and there's no explanation as to why at first, until the captain, having gone off alone for some reason, just assuming everything was safe, gets attacked by feral baboons that have apparently escaped. Let's just think about this for a second. So a Norwegian vessel between Earth or the moon and Mars decided that they wanted to transport baboons or take baboons up into space for some reason. This is a bad idea on premise alone. But just getting away from that, then the baboons went feral and started attacking people. Okay, whatever. Cut to a later scene where, because Brad Pitt displayed emotion in a message out to the Lima Project, which is the project where Tommy Lee Jones's character has basically gone Captain Ahab, where his crew tried to mutiny when they didn't discover any intelligent life scanning around from the orbit of Neptune, different worlds and different systems. Although that wouldn't really make much of a difference considering we have the Hubble. There's not any more or less stuff in the way. I don't know what their thought was, because the Hubble has already done this, but whatever. It's part of the motif. It's part of the plot. It has to get you from point A to point B, and the character has to have an objective, and the objective is to go to this space station in orbit of frickin' Neptune. Neptune. And they even say in the context of the film that it is going to take over 80 days to get there. So he's going to be there in that ship for almost 3 months. But here's the thing. When he gets aboard the ship because they decide he's not fit to go on this mission to rescue his dad and destroy the Lima project, because part of the MacGuffin of the story is that this one space station is sending out power surges that somehow travel through the solar system from Neptune and are disrupting things back on Earth. How? I mean, even when you take into account the vacuum of space, okay, radiation can travel. This is supposed to be a power surge of some kind. But they aren't really able to explain how a small station is doing that. Is it having a ripple effect? Where it, like, picks up ambient radiation somehow? Well, that doesn't really make sense. The MacGuffin of the film, the inciting incident that's supposed to set it off, doesn't make sense. So, he gets aboard this ship. The same ship that took him to Mars is blasting off for Neptune. And he gets aboard via a back door. Because of course he does. This is the Mary Sue part, you get me? Well, the crew is like, oh, well, we're going to have to kill you now, and we've got a gun, and I've got a knife, and we're gonna get you. It's like, no, that would never happen, not during takeoff. You would stay in your seats, and he would eventually be pinned to the back of the pod, back of the capsule, and then after that, then you could try and apprehend him. And guess what? You've probably already got a spacebound flight up there, or they can easily send up a shuttle that can collect him and send him off. You do not have to fight him. You do not have to get weapons. You can just stop that ship in its tracks, and they can collect him with another surface-to-orbit vessel. But they don't do that. So they die, but not because he kills them. You get that? That's where the Mary Sue part comes in again. He's somehow so virtuous that even though he's a soldier in the United States Space Force, he will not kill anyone. So instead, it happens by accidents. This one person started coming towards him just as the ship was firing its rockets. And don't you know, she just hit the wall too hard and ended up dying. All by herself. And this other guy, he was coming at him with a knife, and Roy was defending himself when the commander of the flight, who for some reason was not replaced, or because the captain already died, so they should have had another more senior officer come aboard the ship for the command, but whatever. He has a gun for some reason. Do you know what kind of weapon they would never ever have aboard a ship, a spaceship of any kind? A gun that fires a bullet. At all. You might have a dart gun if you ever needed to put someone down. You might have a dart gun, because then you could sedate them quickly. But this bullet ricochets and ends up hitting a fire extinguisher, and that puts so much carbon dioxide in the air that then they can't breathe, and the two crew remaining alive aren't. So he ejects their bodies into space and then moves on to Neptune. And I'm just like, are we serious here? He commandeers a spaceship and nobody's coming after him. He's not like, wow, I'm way in over my head here. No. He just goes ahead and does it. And then he goes aboard, and of course his shuttle craps out because of these power surges. Which is like, what? That doesn't even... The power surge, yeah, just doesn't make sense. Anyway, so he gets aboard, and his dad's old, all grizzly with a beard, and he doesn't want to go. It's like, I gotta find alien life. Okay. One quick note on the casting. Tommy Lee Jones's character of Clifford McBride has supposedly been out in space for 30 years. Okay, fair enough. The problem is that his son is played by Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is 55, and Tommy Lee Jones is 73. And if I'm doing my math correct, that means that there is just barely 18 years age difference. So, what? He had the baby as soon as he was an adult and then went into the space program? Probably not, because this isn't the 1950s. It's just a bizarre choice of casting, and I think they should have gone with a younger actor than Brad Pitt, because it doesn't make sense. You know, the power surges is a whole other thing, but the difference in age between the actors is not sufficient enough to make me think, okay, this is realistic. I'm guessing that they kind of wanted an actor who was closer to 40, but they could get Brad Pitt. And so they went with Brad Pitt, even though that was a bad move. I mean, honestly, you could have gone with... You could have gone with almost anyone, and it would have been a better choice in terms of the age difference. The acting leaves nothing. It leaves you completely vacant. They might as well not even have people. They might as well have robots playing the parts, or just popsicle sticks, because it is so wooden. And that's no pun intended there, but it works. As it is, box office has agreed. The film, while more of an art house film that has a great deal of spectacle, does not have a great deal of the other necessary storytelling elements that we need in good storytelling, good cinema, or good stagecraft, good plays. The box office take was just over 127 million, with a budget of speculated 80 to 100 million. And in order to satisfy the studio, a film like that has to make back more than double what it cost. So that's why I'm saying what I am. If it had made more than double, closer to triple, if it had actually been fun to watch, it might have been worth something. But as it is, the character, we don't feel sympathetic for him because he doesn't emote at all. It's part of his whole character for the better part of the story. He doesn't emote. His heart rate never increases, even when he's falling from this orbital tether platform down to the Earth's surface. He doesn't get fazed. So, you know, when his wife is writing him a Dear John letter because, you know, he's always away up in space, he, doesn't cry. He doesn't feel anything. It is the most emotionless acting I've seen since Equilibrium. And even that had some emotion to it. As it is, they do show him potentially reconnecting with Liv Tyler's character of the wife, but it's not very satisfying because, as I said, you don't care about these people. You don't have them bonding, laughing. They have no virtues or vices, and that's part of the problem. They're calloused. They're cold. The only thing that we see in terms of a character arc from Roy is that he learns from his father, who doesn't care about him or his mother or anyone back on Earth. He's isolated enough and crazy enough that he would sooner commit suicide than go back to Earth, and does. But he has learned that it's better to be back on Earth with other people. It's better to be with other people than on some great mission alone. And in the meantime, all these people around him have had to die. Now, we don't know that Donald Sutherland's character dies, but it's left murky enough, but we never see his character at the end, which is sad because that would have actually been something emotional that we would have felt something for. He was a friend of Clifford's. He was a friend of Roy's growing up. He's just a family friend. He's someone we're attached to as he's moving away from the Earth. And if he goes back to Earth and is there, he's one of the people that we should see. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, he had a little bit of heart trouble on the moon after they get attacked by moon pirates. I can't believe I just said that. And, oh, he's okay. There's that bit of emotional payoff. We don't care if he reconnects with his estranged wife. Let him not get his wife back. Or let's leave it up in the air. As it is, they leave it up in the air. They just show her at a window while he's sitting at some fashionable modern cafe. And it's full of itself. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't know how to connect human beings to the story. And so it just ends up having this big mind-blowing spectacle of realistic looking space travel because it has familiar shapes and looks. The lunar rovers look like the lunar rovers we had back in the 70s for some reason. The space capsule that takes you from the long-term mission rocket looks a lot like the orbital module from the Apollo missions, just slightly updated in terms of its design. And that's meant to be a transport to take you from one ship to another, or from a ship to a station. And I'm just like, okay. I get what they're going for. They make the spacesuits look familiar. They make everything in the film look as familiar as possible for the prop design and set design. So everything looks like it came directly from the Skylab days, basically. So my main problem with all of it is that it's a film about emotionless people. And if you don't have people who clearly feel anything, what is the point? I feel like so much of this was Mary Sue stuff because the author clearly had some kind of journey as he was writing this, if you follow. He probably got estranged from his wife, and probably got more than a few Dear John letters. And he probably was estranged from his father, and his father didn't care about him, even for the small amount of time that they occasionally spent together. There's probably a whole bunch of personal story in the middle of this dry drama. But so help me, don't put that crap up on screen. Not unless you actually have emotions that you're going to feel. Not unless you want us to feel any emotions for these characters. As it is, we just don't feel anything. And that is such a tragedy because you have all this room in which we could be feeling something and thinking and wanting for these characters. And instead we're just sitting around for 2 hours going nowhere. You end up, well, at least I ended up at several points just going, oh my God, is it over yet? Oh my God, is it over yet? For basically the last half hour of the film. Actually, I'm going to just say it. This film is so poorly paced that you don't feel like you're on any kind of adventure or journey. And it's one of the reasons why you have such a hard time. You actually even get internal monologue, which is extremely pretentious. A lot of authors do it. A lot of writer-directors love doing it for when they have their Mary Sue character going through things, because it's that inner monologue. It's the narration of the thoughts of the character as he's going through these things. And I'm just like, no. Don't do that. If you're going to tell us that he feels these things, you need to show us. If you're going to tell us, oh, he's a changed person from who he was when he first set out, you need to show us that. Like, don't just have him sitting there without any kind of facial expressions, and he sees his estranged wife and just awkwardly waves. Have him actually emote. Maybe cry a little bit. Maybe smile. But the film feels like it is just so wrapped up in toxic masculinity and emotional repression that I can't be certain it wasn't in fact written by aliens attempting to understand our Earth emotions. But is it actually worth watching? That's the whole point of a review like this. You don't necessarily want to know all the plot points. Knowing plot points, knowing spoilers, that doesn't quite ruin it for you. But is this, in my opinion, worth watching? The answer is no. It's unsatisfying. It's unrelentingly boring. The music is nothing to write home about. The cinematography is good. The set design is interesting and would have been better purposed in, like, maybe an alternate timeline Earth rather than sending it in the future. The near future, mind you. It's supposed to be a sci-fi story and a drama at that, but it ends up feeling too small, if you understand. The typical motif for a sci-fi story is to make it an allegory. An allegory is a story that has a kind of moral. It has a certain moralistic nature to the premise, the journey of the character, and the resolution. So there has to be kind of a didactic, as they call it, structure to the story in a lot of sci-fi. And you can look at all kinds of examples of this. Soylent Green. People are not valued, so people begin eating other people as the population is too big for the amount of food available. Everyone kind of knows about Soylent Green, so that's where I'm going with that. Planet of the Apes, another 20th Century Fox sci-fi film. Man's inhumanity to man. Man's tendency to turn others into a second-class subordinate race. And you see that a lot in some of the better films from the Planet of the Apes franchise from back in the last century. So by contrast, you have Ad Astra. And Ad Astra is Latin for to the stars. The whole point is we need to develop things, we need to do better. And instead, Brad Pitt, as Roy, sits there musing about how much life sucks on Earth and how awful human beings are because they just fight over resources and don't work together and don't make life any better for each other there on Earth. And meanwhile, they're going out to the stars and they're just fighting more. And the narration breaks in at odd times, a bit like a film noir, but it ends up feeling, as I said, like a cynic's lack of appreciation for humanity. And then, in the end, it's supposed to be saying, oh, but life is good, and people are good, and it's better to be here on Earth with other people than to be alone and isolated in some great personal search. Well, in all honesty, I feel like the film doesn't know what it's trying to tell the audience, and in so doing, it attempts instead to say, well, what do you get from it? Like it's an art piece. Except it's not an art piece. It's just bad writing. So anyway, yeah, don't check it out. I gotta give it like a 1 out of 5 because it simply doesn't resonate. It doesn't have poignancy or gravitas. It doesn't draw you in. It doesn't make you feel. It doesn't get you thinking about what the character is thinking. You aren't identifying with the character at any point for what he's doing. You're just wondering why he's doing what he chooses to do and why other people do what they choose to do, and why everything is a certain way. Why can't he be a little bit emotional when he's talking to his estranged dad that he hasn't seen in 30 years? And that means he's somehow not fit to go on the mission? When he's saying, I miss you, Dad. I remember you tutoring me in math. That's somehow a deal breaker for him going on the mission? That's the one thing that should help the whole situation from as far as the audience knows at that point. There is absolutely no reason why the woman he meets on Mars just suddenly has this turning point in her character where she decides to help him. But the really weird part that really got to me was that as basically a spook, an intelligence officer is escorting Brad Pitt into this recording booth to record his message to his father to try and get him to, cooperate and stop the power surges. He goes off, and they go off into the shadow, and then they linger for several seconds on this woman who's like some kind of administrator there at the Mars base. Okay, here's my question. Why are they lingering? They linger on the back of her head. Then, after a second, she turns around, and she walks away stone-faced. She doesn't have, like, an expression on her face that tells us anything. She doesn't have, like, a, kind of a smirk or a plaintive look. Oh, I have a thought. I have an idea. Or, she doesn't say, I hope, she doesn't say under her breath, like as she walks away, I hope your dad dies out there, and, or something like that, to give us some kind of lead-in for her motive, because everywhere else, Clifford is a hero. But she knows, because she got a secret message that she shows later, that he's gone kind of space crazy. Clifford has. At some point, we could have been clued into this. We could have had like a little bit of a lead in, have a sense of, oh, the direction is changing in this. There's a bit of a twist. Ooh, what's going to happen? The story isn't about people. The story is about what happens, and that's part of the problem. So anyway, it doesn't work. It doesn't hold up. There's nothing to latch on to emotionally in this film. You just end up about as vacant and empty as the acting is. I don't know what the director was thinking. I don't know where he went to film school. I don't know what the dailies were that the studio was approving of this. But it is just a god-awful film. I mean, given it came out in August, September. August in Venice and September in the United States. And it got, some praise at the Venice Film Festival when it was shown, because it's an art house film. But showing it as a regular blockbuster film in September, you're not going to get anywhere. And September is kind of a mini January in terms of bad movies. It's kind of when they get rid of a lot of stuff. But September is also when you get a lot of art house films, because a lot of the festivals happen. So I don't know. What did you guys think of Ad Astra? Did you guys have the same experience I did? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Just keep them constructive and respectful, please. That's both with regards to me as well as to others, and I'll try and be constructive and respectful to you too. If you want to, hit like, hit subscribe, ding the bell, whatever, and follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on all that. And if you want to contribute to me financially, I would love that. I'm on Cash App, and I'm on Patreon. And links for that are on my Twitter account and on my Facebook page. So you can look those up there. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.